What's going on, everybody? This is Frank Chen with REIClub.com, your link to creative real estate. And I want to welcome you to our podcast where we get face-to-face with real estate investors and experts all around the nation, asking them the questions that you want to know. Now, if you're new today, and you have not had a chance to check out REIClub.com, I encourage you to go ahead and do so. We have tons of free articles, actually thousands of them, hundreds of videos, really cool tools and resources that you can check out absolutely free simply by signing up for our free monthly newsletter. And you can do that at REIClub.com/update. And of course, finally, if you're listening by YouTube or iTunes, we do encourage you to leave us a favorable comment. It really does help us out in producing more of these videos for you. And of course, we do hope you will be enjoying them. So with that announcement, I want to go dive right into things. You guys aren't here for me. You guys are here for the expert. Who we have here today, his name is Alan Cowgill. He's a very good friend of ours. We've known him for, actually, REI Club has known him far longer than I have. I've known Alan for about 6 years now when I first got my job here. He's one of the few people that I got to work with and got to know his business. And for those who don't know what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be covering private money. You know, the basics to private money, kind of how to leverage private money, the importance of private money to really help you guys grow your business, not by just through conventional lenders, and really tapping into this hidden, I would call it a hidden funds for investors just like you and I that do tremendous things for your business. So with that being said, I want to just go ahead and bring on Alan. Alan, how you doing today, man?
I'm great and glad to be here, Frank.
Thank you. And for those who don't know, we actually did a recording last week, and if we had some problem with the audio and video and things like that. So we're glad that Alan taking time to jump back on with us a week later to kind of knock this out for you. You guys are not going to be disappointed. So Alan, for those who don't know who you are, let's give like a quick, spiel of, maybe your background. How did you get started into private money?
Yeah, I started out in corporate world. I got a quarter century in corporate America. And as I was climbing that corporate ladder one day, I realized I had the ladder against the wrong wall. I heard that 92% of the population retire at poverty level after working a job all their life. And it got my attention because I'd seen that happen to some of my family members. And I realized the way I was living, it was going to happen to me if I didn't change what I was doing. Kind of let you know what I was going through, Frank.
Yeah.
I was living in a little dinky 2-bedroom apartment. Even though I'd been successful in corporate America, I was struggling paying my bills, and I had this old beat-up car that I needed to put some money into, but I was too busy paying my other bills, and I put that on the back burner. And just kind of let you know what was happening at the time, on a very first date, that car paid me back for not letting me do any maintenance work on it. I pulled up in front of this apartment complex, take this lady home, and walk her to her door, and I hopped out of the car and started to walk up to the door with her and turned around and looked, and my car had burst into flames. I tell you, yeah, when I speak all over the nation, people yell out "hot date." It was more like first and last date. Kept me frustrated, and you imagine how embarrassing it was standing there holding her hand, watching the fireman put my car out. I mean, every morning when she woke up, the remembrance of that date was a burnt chard mark in the parking lot. Oh. And I'll tell you, I needed to change things, but I didn't know what to do. I looked into franchises, but they take money. Couldn't do that. I did decide to invest, so I decided that I'd take my whole federal tax return and put it down on lottery tickets. Not the sharpest thing to do, I'll tell you. I lost on every ticket, kept me frustrated, and one night I couldn't sleep. I was worried about paying my bills, and I got up and I started to channel surf, and I hit one of those real estate infomercials, and it got my attention. And I didn't have the money to buy the system because I spent my money that day on lottery tickets. But he'd take a credit card, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I picked up the phone, and I ordered that home study system, and I became enthralled with real estate. And that year I bought 2 properties, an extra 5, and then 18. And since that point in time, I bought hundreds of real estate deals. So that's how I got started with getting into real estate. So we can talk about private money here in just a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you mind asking what your background was? What were you doing in corporate America?
Yeah, I was a manager. I had departments, all those flashing airplane lights that you see. I worked for aerospace. My department would make the strobe lights and
cool.
Yeah, and the cockpit lights. And I was on different projects with the company. I'd flown to Europe once just to give a 20-minute presentation. So And I live in Ohio, so that was pretty cool. So
Nice.
yeah, so I wore a lot of different hats. I was in materials and overproduction and just a lot of different hats in the company.
It's just so interesting, like a lot of the interviews that we've conducted with the speakers, it's, we always hope, do you have like some kind of real estate background? It's like, nah, like everybody comes from all jacks of all trades. And I think that's what's awesome about real estate. For those on the call, if you're just wondering, is this for me? It's like, it's for everybody. You just got to be motivated and get involved. So let me ask you, so you fell into private money. Well, obviously, I'm guessing you use private money for a lot of your deals.
Yeah, sure do. What happened was I was coming up through this real estate education. I hear this thing about private money and hard money lenders, and I thought they were the same, and actually they're distinctly different. A hard money lender sets a bunch of rules, but with a private lender, I got to set the rules. And so my mom had come into some money when my dad had passed away, and she had taken the money and plunked it down on a bank certificate of deposit. And she would drive 45 minutes one way just to get a few pennies more on her bank CD. And what happened was I realized that she could loan that money to me for my real estate deal. So I went back and I said, look, Mom, you're getting a paltry low rate of return on a bank CD. I can pay you 3, 4, 5 times what you're getting on a bank CD. And I'll give you a mortgage, a promissory note, hazard insurance, and lender title insurance. I'll pay you simple interest only. And Mom jumped for joy, and she started loaning me money. And that was my first private lender. And I started in this business a couple of decades ago. And my first lender, which is my mom, was started 2 years later.
That's awesome. And so people, like, in case you didn't catch that, like, how long have you been doing this for, Alan? How long have you been teaching and using private money for?
Well, I started out in real estate in 1995. I got my first lender in 1997, and I started teaching around 2001.
Oh, so you've been teaching for 15 plus years now.
A long time.
Oh,
yeah.
Wonderful. And right now you currently own real estate as well?
Yeah, oh, sure. Yeah.
Oh,
sure
absolutely. Do. Cool. So if you guys keep seeing me looking over here and things like that, I have my questions here on one screen, and then I have Alan over here. So as you said, you touched on the point of like private lending versus hard money lenders. We do here at REI Club tend to have some newer investors here who've always been hearing about private lenders and hard money. Now, let me ask you this. What is the main attraction to private lenders to a mom and pop investor, someone who's just looking for their first investment?
Well, for an example, most people don't know that they can loan money to us, to real estate investors. And folks like my mom, what they do is they're trying to get a high rate of return on some money that they've acquired over time. And they typically go down and they put it on a bank certificate of deposit, or they might have it on a self-directed IRA, and they're looking to get a high rate of return. Well, when you take a look at a bank CD, gee whiz, the returns are so low right now. It's like 25% of 1%. Okay, yeah. 0025 or something right now. And so it's just horrible returns. And we come along as real estate investors, and we can give them a mortgage, a promissory note, hazard insurance, and title insurance. And then also we can pay them a high rate of return. If you look, as I go all over the nation, I see what people are paying their private lenders. And what happens is they're paying around 6 to 8% right now. It's going rate, okay? Well, you multiply that many times from a person that's doing a bank CD. I mean, it's just phenomenal return. In fact, if I take you back in time, Frank, when I started out with my first private lender, the going rate back then was 15%. And that seems gigantic right now, and it is. Yeah. Well, what happened is over time, the market changed, and I got feedback from my private lenders that 15% was too good to be true. So I adjusted my rate downward to make them happy, so they felt comfortable. I dropped it to 10 and 12%, and I did 10% if they do monthly payments, 12% if they would let the money accrue, and they got paid when I got paid, which is when I sold the property. And the interesting thing about that is when I got started at 15%, I never thought someone would accept no monthly payments. Well, what happened was I found out that half of my lenders are happy with a higher rate of return and no monthly payments because they don't need the money to live off of because they get the money on a self-directed IRA. So it's a win-win. They get a high rate of return, and I don't have to worry about monthly payments.
Man, I've always been curious, as long as I've known you, like, how was it? Do you still remember the first time you approached your very first, it was your mom. So how about the second person?
Second person? Yeah.
Yeah, like, do you remember that feeling and kind of what you had to do in order to get them on board? Could you walk us through that process?
Yeah, sure. My second private lender, his name was Ed, and I went over to his home, and I sit at his kitchen table, and he asked me some questions, and I'm a little bit embarrassed to tell you, I couldn't answer all of his questions at the time because I was new at it.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I figured it out and called him back afterwards. But the good news is he had enough confidence in me and that he loaned me money that night. He agreed to loan me some money. And so eventually his wife had loaned me money, and one of his kids, his sons, had loaned me money. So I hear from one private lender, I ended up with 3. But what had happened was it's all about credibility and confidence, and the lender has confidence that you're going to do what you say. And so I went in there. I was very sincere about my business and passionate about it, actually. And I told him about what I was doing with my business and where the money would go and how he would get paid back and all that. And he agreed to loan me the money. So that was the first one. How I felt when I went in, well, my knees are knocking, and that stuff. So a little bit nervous. But the interesting thing about this is on getting private money is actually the private lender needs us worse than we need them. And we get better at it the more private lenders we get. Because after you get your first one, then you learn and you see how the flow of the paperwork goes and things like that. When you get the second one, you're able to answer more questions. You formulate your program, how much interest you're going to pay them when they get paid back, how the money's used. And so you learn as you go, I guess. And what happens is you have more confidence every time you get another lender. And it makes it so much easier to get more lenders that way.
From your experience, Alan, where do you feel is the biggest fear that comes from investors who have never maybe have asked for private money?
What to say. In fact, I call it the fear monster of what to say to a private lender. And so what I do is I teach my students about scripts.
Okay.
To practice ahead of time. And I've got 2 basic ones. One is to see if they got any money. First off, you want to know if they got money or if they're broke.
That'd be important, yeah.
If they're broke, you move on. So,
right.
You can always ask referrals, obviously. But if they got money, then what you want to do is move into a 30-second commercial, is what I call it, to where you tell them about your business. It's a terse statement that lets them know what you do. And it has to be one that you can memorize and that's very succinct. Okay, so mine is I'm a real estate investor in Springfield, Ohio, and at times I borrow money from folks just like you. I pay a high rate of return. Can I tell you more? So that's my elevator speech. That's my 30-second commercial after I find out that they got money. Now, in that script that I just gave you, the components of that are very important. First off, I come out and I say, I'm a real estate investor in Springfield, Ohio, and I buy, fix, and sell single-family homes. And at times, I elevate my voice there typically, making it sound like I don't always do it, but I always do it. At times, I borrow money from folks just like you. I pay a high rate of return, and that's the hook. If you don't get that in, you just wasted your whole time. Because that's in what's in it for them. And then the final thing I do, Frank, is I open it up for questions because I want to know where their head's at. And what happens with private lenders, they typically fall into 3 categories. One category is someone that is worried that they're going to lose their investment. How's my money secure?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The second one is you run into folks that kind of the other way, and they want to get greedy. They don't want you to pay them 8%. They want 20% or something like that. Okay. They try to push you for higher interest rate to see if they can push you a little bit. And then the third kind is they want to find out if you're for real. If you're brand new at this, they want to try to qualify you, and they'll want to know if you have any other private lenders. And if you're new at it and you don't have any, then that was a tough question for me early on but I realize that there's a very simple way to answer that.
Yeah.
If you'd like to know that, I'll do that right now. Is for folks out there that don't have any private lenders, and they get that question like, how many lenders do you have? What I do is I want to let the private lender know that this is something new for me, and just like a new business startup, like a doctor.
Yeah.
And what a doctor does to become a doctor is the first thing they do is they get an education. That's step one. The second thing is they line up their money so that they can get their doctor equipment, their computers, and their desk and all that, so that they can get to the third step, which is to open up for business, hang their shingle, if you will, and open up a business to be a doctor. So what I do with my students is I tell them what they need to do if they get asked that question of how many lenders do you have. Go back and tell them about the fact that you're a new business startup. Walk them through the three steps and tell them that you're in step 2 and that you have created a program to where you have instant access to cash, and it's a win-win program. And if you don't do that, then all the good deals are going to be gone because your competitors are buying a property for all cash. And in order for you to compete, you have to do the same. So you've created a program where the private lender wins by getting a phenomenal rate of return, and you win by getting instant access to cash. And once you get all your lenders lined up, then you're going to go ahead and, just like a doctor, open up for business. You're going to go ahead and start buying property, and you're looking for people that want to get in on the ground floor.
And I want to follow up on that, and I think you made a really good point here is, if you're if you're listening to this today and you've had troubles qualifying with banks, you've had a problem dealing with conventional lenders, this may be one of your only options, if your credit's not great or things like that. So if you're out there complaining like, I don't have money to do these things, there are ways to get money, but it requires what we call sweat equity, right? You got to put forth the effort. You got to be prepared. I know a few years back, like you said, right, in the 90s, when you didn't know what you were doing going in, you were nervous, but you were able to manage. Do you feel like even today, 15 years, 20 years later, can an investor go in not prepared and kind of navigate through and get to the goal of getting money, or should they just really get all the paperwork ready, get their education right, get their ducks in a row before speaking to someone?
Well, I think there's a middle ground from what you just said. Okay. I wouldn't go in cold because there's some laws, some rules out there that you need to know about, and some techniques that you should know about, which I've already given you some on the.
Those are really good, by the way. Thank you for those.
The scripts and things like that. And the other side of the coin is I see people worrying too much before they ever get their first lender, and they never pull the trigger. And so I would recommend that folks get a good education and get on with it. I have students coming to my event, and they don't have a lender, and within the first 24 hours, they've got lenders many times. And so it's that easy once they know the techniques. I teach them the techniques first day, and then they pull the trigger that night. And here coming into the event, they didn't have any lenders, and they didn't know if they were ever going to get a lender, and then they turn around and have one within 24 hours. So it's amazing.
It still surprises me today when I talk to an investor, whether at a conference, at an event, and I'm like, oh, where are you getting your funding from? It's like, oh, we're still going with the banks. Like, have you ever heard of, have you worked with a private lender before? And they're all like, oh, no, I don't, really know that much about it. And I'm like, wow, you've bought property without ever using private money. And I use private money. My first private lender was my mom. So I bought my first rental property that way. I bought my first flip property that way. Got her money back and some. That's kind of how I did it. She of course gave me the son discount. We're like, no, you're fine. You can keep the profits. I don't need anything back. Yeah. But I treated it like a business. I gave her money back just to get into that mode. Now, you talked about being prepared, showing your credibility. I know in some of our videos we've talked about credibility kits.
Yes.
Like how to create a binder or some sort of pamphlet that immediately just hand to people and be like, hey, here's who I am and here's what I can do for you. What are some major components of that people should start, thinking of, getting, start preparing? I'll leave that up. Yeah,
that's a great question. the bottom line on this is private lenders loan you money based on the fact that they trust you, So one of the tools that I use is a credibility kit. And here's the components of mine. On the front cover, I put a picture of property. If you've got property like you have, you can do before and after pictures. If we got people listening that have never bought a property, just take your smartphone, go out and take a picture of something that you'd like to buy that would represent what type of property you're going to buy, because there's different types of property. There's ugly property, there's pretty houses, there's luxury homes. 40% of my student base is commercial. So you got strip malls, you got office buildings, warehouses. Storage units, popular. Take a picture of what you want to buy, put it on the cover. Next part of it is a page on me. I do a full one page on me. Then the next page is a page on the company.
Oh, okay.
So they can read up about that. And then I wanted to make sure that they knew about my education, because the foundation of this education, Frank, this, is just what you're doing right now for everybody listening, is to give people a solid education. And so we as real estate investors, in order to be successful, got to have a solid education with this. And so I wanted to let my private lenders know about my education. But when I went out to events or I bought home study systems, I didn't have any paperwork to show for it, if you will, a certificate or diploma or anything like that. Right. And so what I realized was that OfficeMax sells certificate paper. So I just went out and made my own. I just went out and got a bundle of certificate paper, put the information on there about the class that I had, 2-day, 4-day event or whatever it was, who the instructor was. And then on many of those, I put a line in there for the instructor to autograph it, send it off to him, and had him send it back, self-addressed stamped envelope. So I've got their autograph in there. Put that in my credibility kit. The other thing I've got in there, which is very unique, is 12 questions and answers about the typical questions that a private lender would ask you. And so I realized what those are. And so I just went ahead and answered them right in my credibility kit. So if I've got a private lender that is thumbing through my credibility kit and they hit that, then they can scan down through the questions. And if they key on one that they're got mulling around in their head, they're right there. I answer it for them so they can get their answer for that. And I also have that as a separate handout if I want to hand it out to private lenders too. How I stage my houses and different information on that, different things. If I've given speeches, obviously, and things like that, or organizations. Many people are right now part of a REIA group. Well, put a page in there on your REIA group, different things like that. Anything that'll give you credibility. Testimonials, put those in there too. I'm
curious, like with our Web 2.0, where technology, everything's digital these days. Do you feel that there's still a tremendous amount of value sitting down with someone in person versus just, hey, I'm just going to email you this credibility kit. Let me know what you think. If you're interested, hit me back. What do you feel is the best approach still today?
Well, what I like to do is I've got 16 different ways to locate private lenders, and one of those is to do a group meeting. Another one is to do a one-on-one. Half my students do one-on-ones, the other half do the group meeting. It's whatever you desire and whatever your comfort zone is. But I would sit down and talk to a lender for a little bit, let them answer their questions, and then what I would do on the credibility kit. Or I've also got an audio CD. When I meet with them, I would give them one or both of those. Some people like to read, like my mom. My adult children, they'd rather listen to the audio CD. Some people like me like to do both. And so what I would do is just make those items available to them so that they could go away and listen to them or read them. Okay. Now, many times what will happen is when you meet with a private lender and potential private lender, and you have your laptop and you've got a PowerPoint presentation on the laptop, many times they'll loan money right there.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of times, it's over at that point. So, that's a beautiful thing. And then you're on from there.
So this next part, I think, some of our more, seasoned investors may love this. And what we've known Alan for all these years, and what many students who have been in his program, who has left, who have really absorbed all this information, I've always known you as the luncheon guy. You know, you're the guy who sets up the luncheons. You know how to position yourself at these luncheons to get as much money as possible. So I'd love to dive into that just a little bit and kind of see, are you scheduling it at, like, 5-star hotels, or are you doing it at like a Luby's, or are you like, what are some key factors you're looking for when booking a place, the type of people you're inviting, how much money you're trying to, a goal, do you have like a 500,000, here's the goal, here's how much we have. Give us a little bit of insight to your famous luncheons.
Yeah, well, first off, I never desired to be called the luncheon guy.
That's how I know you. That's how I've known you.
and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but what the reason I'm called that is because when I started out, I only had these 2 private lenders, and then I didn't get any private lenders for 4 years. I, like many folks listening, went down to the corner bank and got my money there, and I languished in my job. And if I would have embraced this private lender concept, I would have been able to get out of my job quicker, but I didn't see the power and the potential at that point. And so what happened was, finally the company had a layoff, and I volunteered. They had a sweetened package. I wanted to be a full-time real estate investor, so I quit. The only problem of it is my timing was a little bit off. I had to evict some folks, and I ran into a negative $10,000 a month cash flow problem. Banks shut me off. They wouldn't touch me because I didn't have a paycheck. Even though I had that temporary one for a few months, they wouldn't loan me money. And so I realized that I needed to bring money into my life. And people would tell you to go get private lenders, but they didn't tell you how. And the how is critical. And so I had to figure it out for myself. Well, I had been very successful in corporate America making PowerPoint presentations. Like I said, I went to Europe and gave a 20-minute talk once. And so I was a high skill area for me. So the natural thing for me to do was to create a PowerPoint slide presentation and hold a group meeting, a luncheon, if you will. Buy them lunch, bribe them with a free lunch to have them show up. And so the first morning I walked into this meeting, I didn't know if I was going to be alone or if there'd be 50 folks in a room. And there was actually 18 potential lenders. And I got up in front of them, and I told them about my real estate business. I told them about my dreams and my aspirations. I showed them my PowerPoint slide presentation, and then I just flat out asked them to loan me money, and it worked, and I did it again the next month, and I had 12 folks show up, and it worked again. And a couple months later, I grabbed a pad and a pen, and I added it up, and I had $1 million to go buy property. And so the natural thing for me to do when I got up and I started teaching was to share that experience with my students. And I have now been tagged with the luncheon guy, like you called me, okay? And it's stuck all these years. But my favorite way of getting money is to hand out an audio CD that I created. And I had my voice on it, but now I've got a radio announcer, one of those guys on talk radio.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Okay. And so I've taken it up a level. So it's a very compelling voice and a very compelling message. So that's one of my favorite ways. But let me tell you about the luncheon. On the luncheons, you asked me about the bottom line on the luncheon. It is a very powerful way to get money. Just think about what politicians are doing. You know, they hold fundraising luncheons all the time. They're going on all the time, all over the nation. And so there's a reason for that. It's because they work. And let me tell you, there's only 2 reasons to have a luncheon, Frank. Number one, if you can imagine a guy that's negative $10,000 a month cash flow, and if I was going to go around and talk to 18 folks, it would take me a week or more to get through everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Because you'd schedule them and reschedule and all that. If I do a luncheon, I can talk in 30 minutes, have lunch, and within an hour, I know whether I got money or not. They're either in or out, okay?
Let me ask you real quick. The people that you have here, are these friends, families? Did you send out some direct?
You start out with friends and family, and the reason being is there is some restrictions on when you can work with strangers. You have to fill out some paperwork with the SEC if you want to talk to strangers.
And I remember asking you this question last time, which was, what is that paperwork that people should?
Yeah.
What's it called?
Well, there's some paperwork that's state only.
Okay.
And there's some paperwork. There's a federal SEC, and every state has a division of the SEC.
Oh, right.
So if you want to get lenders within your state, you would typically just use the state's paperwork. If you want to go across state lines and all that, you can use the federal government paperwork.
Okay.
So I'll answer your question on the states. It is in 44 states. There's paperwork called Small Company Offering Registration. For abbreviation, it's called SCORE, S-C-O-R,
Okay.
Small Company Offering Registration. So if you fill that document out, pay a very small fee. It's different amounts, but in different states, because they get to say how much money they want. In fact, I think they're doing it for the revenue, but I'm just guessing. But they get a small fee, and then you can go out and advertise for lenders within your state. In 40 states, there is a form called a Model Accredited Investor Exemption Form. They abbreviate it, called the MAE form.
Oh, okay.
M-A-E, okay. And then you can only work with what's called accredited investors in your state. Again, those are investors that are worth $1 million, not counting their personal residence, and they're making $200,000 a year this year, and they expect to make it next year. So it's people that are well-heeled. So you can go after those folks to loan you money. And the beauty of the SCORE and the Model Accredited Investor is that you can advertise to get them. Now, on the federal level, the big hammer out there that people like is called the Private Placement Memorandum. Some of the old timers that are listening right now, they'll know that as syndication. The federal number that you can look up is called a 506 Reg D, if you want to look it up. Now, in September of 2013, they really made it beneficial to us real estate investors, because before that you couldn't advertise. Now, if you want to advertise, you use the 506 Rule C, like C as in cat, 506 Rule C, and then you can advertise. But here again, it's only to accredited investors, okay? But a lot of my students love that, and it's a very powerful tool. It's federal, and the beauty of that is you can raise unlimited amount of money.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a pro tip right there, guys, of getting registered with your state, being able to do this. And was this a recent regulation that passed, or?
Well, what happened in the early 2012, Congress wanted to force the SEC to allow business people to be able to advertise to get private money. And they had this 506 Rule D, which is called a private placement, and people weren't allowed to advertise. We were not allowed to advertise. We had to just hand it out and see if people would want to loan us money.
Yeah.
Well, what happened is finally in September of 2013, because of Congress in early 2012, the SEC in September 2013 had birth on this Rule C, where we now can advertise to find private lenders. So it's a beautiful thing. How
many investors do you think actually know about these regulations? Like right now, what do you rough percentage? Just throwing it out there.
Well, when I have my events, I teach this, and what happens is about 25% of the room, when I get done, they realize that they want this 506 Rule C.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But coming into the room, it's very gray, and people don't understand it, and people are very confused about the SEC. The beauty, Frank, of the rules with the SEC is there's not a lot of them, and they're very easy. The problem of it is most real estate investors don't know about them. To answer your question, most real estate investors don't know about them. In fact, what happened to me was when I started teaching this, I'm not an attorney. I hired an SEC attorney to tell me what the rules are.
Yeah.
And since I was actually international speaker, he had to research every state in the United States and Canada. And when he got back, he called me up and he said, "Hey, I want to thank you." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Well, I'm done with my project that you gave me, and I'm moving into my new home, and you just bought it." Now, that is not what you want to hear from anyone, that you just bought their home. But everybody listening, that should tell you that the dedication and the moral obligation I had to you to get the facts. And so now, when I go out and teach, or like what you and I are doing right now, Frank, I can teach with authority. I'm not giving legal advice, but I can tell people what's allowed and what's not allowed. And so knowing these rules is critical to real estate investor. And the beauty of it is they're very easy. There's actually 5 basic rules in every single state, and that's the baseline for real estate investors, to know the 5, and then they can pick, after they know those 5, they can pick one of 7 programs with the SEC or programs, plural, that they can use to fund their business. Whether they want to work with family, friends, and associates and not have to advertise, or whether they want to work with only strangers, or whether they only want to work with these accredited investors, they get to pick.
And this is just one component, right? One area where you can attract private money, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So then there's tons of other ways, guys. As long as you know people, especially if you're in profession of, you have doctor, lawyer friends. I know they have a ton of money that they're willing to just, give to investors to invest. So I know that I think what we're going to try to do, I talked to Alan before, is that we want to do a follow-up covering specifically the 506D and the Rule C. Because I think we could probably easily talk over hours on that, huh?
I would think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. I would love to have Alan back on, invite you back on to talk about specifically those 2 regulations. While I do have you on, I do want to touch on a point that, typically, when you're dealing with like $100,000 home, or in some places you're dealing with a $200,000, even $300,000 home, are you able to find just one person who's willing to give you that much money, or are you having to find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lenders? And how do you work, say it's more than 1 or 2 people, how do you work them into like paperwork or into a deal so everybody's happy, everything's legal?
Sure. Yeah. First off, let's start the beginning. When a private lender, you got to understand, when you find one, they don't know what the rules are. And if you have promised them that the money is secured by real estate, then you don't want to touch the check. You don't want to touch the money. Okay. We want this money to be secured by the property. And so what will happen is the money will go into the title company's escrow account, okay? And in doing that, you'll have your lender either send in a bank check or a wire to the title company. Not too early. You want it there about a week or 10 days ahead of your closing. Send it in, and then the money will be there ready for your closing. Now, to answer your question, then the typical way is one house or one property, one investor, but sometimes you can't do that. I got 40% of my student base is commercial, and even with people with houses, sometimes if they got a $100,000 house, like you said, maybe they only got a lender that's got $70,000, and you need money for the rest of it and rehab and stuff like that. So what I do is I will stack up mortgages. You can have multiple mortgages on a property. Bigger chunk of money will get the first mortgage. Second chunk of money will get the second mortgage. Of course, the person in the 73rd position won't be very happy, but no, you can have 1 or 2 or 3 mortgages on a property, whatever works out. Just make sure you line them up with whoever has the biggest chunk of money is protected by being in a higher position. Okay, and I've had that, and that happens. The other way is to pool money to where, let's say you're going to buy a apartment complex, and you have let's say an LLC, some entity that's LLC-A, and you buy it with that, and then you have a second entity which is LLC-B, and that's your lenders, and they loan money to LLC-A, and all your lenders here would be in their in first position, if you will, but they would be based on the percentage of their loan.
Okay, right. Yep.
So you could pool, it's called pooling funds, but that's one of those things that you have to ask for permission with the SEC before you do it. Okay, paperwork's very simple, but you can do that. Yeah, but in your example, you're exactly right. One lender, one property is the best.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that's the ultimate.
Yeah.
And that's what most of mine are, but in some cases it doesn't work out that way for the lender, and so some people are going to be in a second position. Now, I get asked every now and then, Frank, do my lenders complain if they're in second position? And I've only really, in all my years, really only had one lender complain, and I just told him to give me more money. That's all the problem.
Oh, that was good. I thought it was going to be something more complicated than that.
No, it's pretty simple. It's simple stuff. Yeah.
you want to be in first position, there's someone that you could just pay me an extra 20 grand.
That's it. Give me more money.
That's good. Did he end up giving you more money?
No, he never made it.
Oh, okay. So he's like, I'm okay with second position.
Yeah. Now, he understands it now. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Let me ask you this: have you ever had have you ever had a private lender quit on you, or like, oh, this is not for me anymore? And how did you handle that situation?
Well, let me take you down two paths. That's a great question. The answer is yes. But people listening right now think that probably happens a lot. It is an extreme rarity where someone will ask for their money back. And the reason being is the only reason they ask for their money back is because they've had a life change. Child is ready to go to college, or the child wants a down payment on a house. Okay, something like that. When they have a big life change like that, then a lot of times they'll ask for their money back, okay? But it might just be one or two lenders, one lender every year or two, I should say. So it's not a lot. And to replace that, the money is just a phone call away. You just call up another lender and have them send money in. And they're chomping at the bit to do it. I've replaced money as quick as 24 hours. I tell my lenders it's going to take 45 days to get their money back. And the reason I did that was early on when I established my rules, it's because I was fearful that I'd have to go to a bank to replace the money. So I allowed 45 days to do that. In reality, you can replace the money in a week. So you just call up the next lender and have the lender do that. So the other point I want to talk about on this, you and I have, Frank, gotten this business because we wanted to have a good life.
Absolutely.
And that means making your life easy. And for me, making my life easy is working with private lenders. Okay. And so in doing that, if you get a lender that's a stinker, if you will, then you can get rid of them. And the way to get rid of them is just bring in another lender and replace them and go from there. And so that's another beautiful thing about this business.
The flexibility of private money still astounds me. Just imagine like being able to replace a bank with another bank, how much paperwork goes into that, how much communication needs to happen. And just a matter like dealing with replacing money, it's just so much more attractive doing it this way. Let me ask you this now. This may be tapping back into the earlier questions of like lending and things like that, but what advice do you have for investors who are not familiar with interest rates, who don't really know what to give back to people to make it more attractive? Is there a reference point? Should they be, asking their banks what they're offering and maybe offering a few points higher than that? Or, what ideally, where can they start researching this kind of information?
Well, what you have to look for is that a new person out there, they might want to pay a high rate of return, and they got to be a little bit cautious of getting out of the ballpark on this, because when interest rates start to go up, housing loans and things like that, your lenders are going to expect you to be higher too. Mm-hmm. And you could get yourself up there so high that it's painful for you, and you're too good to be true. Okay, so if you take a look at what banks are paying on mortgages, and I have some of my students go like 5% higher than that. So, if it's banks at 3, they might be at 8, that kind of stuff. And then they could kind of float with that. I have another student out in Kansas that he'll float off of the T-bills, whatever the going rate. And his is a little bit too anal for me. His is a daily rate to where it floats every day. Okay. And so based on what the T-bill is, then he adds his percentage on top of that. So you could be like 4% above the banks, or 5 or 3, whatever you're comfortable with, and just have it float with that. What I kind of use is what makes common sense based on where the interest rates are right now, and what I think it fits with the investors. And so I pay 6% if people want monthly payments, 8% if they'll let the money accrue, and they get paid when I get paid, which is when I sell the property.
And then it's kind of just, here are your two kind of buffets or whatever. He's like,
Right.
here's your two choices. You could pick one, or here are your
Right.
investment options. That's
Yeah.
nice. So having options is very well. Of course, when it comes to lender, I as an investor would love to have more options.
Yep. Yep. And I don't change mine a lot either. I just let things stabilize and go along. And then when I see things really starting to change, because the markets always change. We know that.
Yeah,
You just be ready for that. And so when they start to change, then I at some point I'll make a change, and then I don't knee jerk it. I just let it go for a while.
So it's not like you grandfather people in at a specific interest. For instance, they give you money, you give it back to them, and however long it takes for you to sell the property. Do they ever feel like they want more the next time, or do they want the same, or do you make those adjustments?
The only one grandfather's mom.
She gets the special discount.
Yeah. Well, what'll happen is I had a guy, a great investor of mine, a friend of mine now, and we go out for coffee every now and then. But he started out at a certain percentage, and then he sold a Subway, and he had a big chunk of money coming in, and he said, if I give you this chunk of money, can I get 20%? And the way I always answer him is, that's outside the scope of my program. Okay, that's outside the scope of my program. So what that did was to come back and solidify the fact that I've got a program. I'm going to stay within my boundaries, and I'm not going to be pushed around and ask for more money. It's a rarity. Every now and then someone will come back, and want a little bit more or more like he did because he had a big chunk of money coming in. But I don't. I got my program and I stick to it. And the program works. And
to touch into that is, like all things you do when it comes down to numbers, being familiar with the numbers, knowing what's within your parameters, because you wouldn't want to just, especially if you're like, say you're an investor, you're desperate, like I have a deal, I need this money now. Would you say, like, and you feel free to chime in or agree or disagree here, but don't put yourself in a bad position, even potentially worse than banks or even hard money, just to get money for a deal. Would you agree?
That's true. I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
I agree. Yeah.
Because there's probably just a phone call away, maybe 3 or 4 phone calls away. Maybe that's that next person who believes your terms are amazing to them.
Actually, you brought up a very good point, because what I found, Frank, is this is a numbers game. And like I said earlier, the private lenders need us worse than we need them. And you call up a person and talk to them about your program, and if they want to think about it, move on to the next person, and then talk to them, and then move on to the next person. You aren't going to have to ask very many people until somebody says yes. In fact, I look at getting private money as just like after you get a few lenders, if you need money, it's just like ordering pizza. You just pick up the phone and money shows up, okay? Just like if you pick up the phone and pizza shows up.
Oh, geez. I love that analogy. I love pizza, and I also love money, so it works out.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to come down to the end of this interview here. We're going to wrap things up, and I love asking this question and I think it's the most beneficial to our investors, is looking back when you started, the advice you can give to our newer investors, people who have never used like private money. What were some mistakes, or maybe your biggest mistake that you made that you've overcome and feel like, man, now you guys out there do not ever have to make this same mistake?
Okay, I'll answer that. But first, let me tell you the best thing I did.
All right.
Best thing I did is get a foundation on education like you and I are doing right now.
Absolutely.
Because the bottom line on this business is to get an education, okay? And so I started out by joining a REIA group, didn't even know they existed. Got that home study system, heard about them, joined one. Then I was a board of directors for 5 years on there, going to boot camps and getting an education. But along the way, I heard this thing about private money and hard money, and I didn't have it figured out. And I actually made 2 mistakes. One was I should have embraced this private money concept quicker, learned about it, and brought it into my life, because I'd get, even though a great credit, I'd get shut off by a bank and have to go to another bank, okay? Or I get a line of credit and you max it out and you shut your own business down, or you go to a hard money lender. And I'd rather be a hard money lender than, borrow money from one, because the rates are high. And I've got so much money. At one time I couldn't spend it all, and so I loaned out some money as a hard money lender. So, it's a great way to go. The other way is learning the SEC rules. If you're going to having private money is just like a sporting event. You not only need to know the fundamentals of the event. You also need to know the rules. There's a rule book with every sporting event. And so having private money, you need to know the fundamentals of how to attract and how to convert people into private lenders and how to manage them once you get them. Those three things: attract, convert, and manage. And then you need to understand the rule book with the SEC so you don't break any rules. And the rules are very simple. You just need to know what they are. So that's it.
Plain and simple, just like private money is. And it's just a matter of, and we always try to encourage you guys out there, if you've never considered it as a financial option, to really look into it, and, if you need more information or you'd like to have any specific questions for us or for Alan, how do people get a hold of you? Can you provide your email address and
Sure.
also a website, if people want some more information, probably try to get them more education.
Yeah, website, it's 4 whole words. The first one is www.privatelendingmadeeasy.com. Private Lending Made Easy. That's the website. And then my email is MKT, and then the @ sign, and then my initial A for Alan, A, and then my last name, Cowgill, COWGILL.com.
Fantastic.
MKT, okay, at acowgill.com.
MKT@acowgill.com.
You got it.
So, guys, thank you guys so much, Alan, for your time today. I love interviewing you, man. I wish we could. I wish I did more of these in the past few years. I know you've been busy taking care of things in your life, and but definitely, guys, you're going to see a lot more of Alan. We're going to have him back again. We're going to talk about that 506(c)(d) those regulations. Really get you guys more familiar with private money. Again, we hope you guys did enjoy today's interview, and by letting us know that. Simply just go to our iTunes, give us a good rating, go to YouTube, likes, comments. It all helps us out in creating more content for you. And like Alan said, to help build on that education every day, if not, every hour of your life. So we're really trying to be here to help you guys out. Do us a favor, okay? And let us know. Let us know what you think. So with that, we look forward to talking to you guys next time. We hope you enjoyed it. Good investing. Take care. And bye-bye, everyone.